And Dennis, just to emphasize those higher energy prices, because Jay Powell did discuss that, does that stoke inflation, Dennis, or does that actually dampen growth? Meaning, we're going to our gas stations, we're topping off the tanks, you see that bill, and you think the best bet is to cut back on spending. Which is it, Dennis?
It's both, actually. It dampens growth in the sense that the consumer is affected by gasoline prices. One of the things I learned when I was at the Fed is it's probably the most prominent price that the consumer experiences. And therefore, what happens at the gas pump factors through to spending on the part of households. So that's certainly an effect, and that would perhaps dampen activity. At the same time, energy is involved in all transportation of goods. It's involved in transportation services that we all consume, airlines and such. And some of those influences are delayed. It takes time for the higher prices to actually be reflected in prices. So we could see inflationary pressures that are in the core measure of goods that reflect some pressure from energy prices.
Dennis, on that point, though, we did hear the Fed chair say, look, it depends on how long these prices stay at this level, how sustained they are. We're talking about those like Goldman calling for $100 a barrel for a little longer going into next year. I mean, how do you calculate that impact on inflation so far? You mentioned the lag factor, and that's certainly going to be something we're going to be looking for. But given how quickly it has gone up,
well, sometimes we forget, or sometimes we have a tendency to conflate higher prices that have moved higher and then stabilized with inflation. Inflation is a rate of change. So I think the question is, how long will it take for the most recent rise, assuming we don't see any further rise in energy costs, to play through to prices, and then when will that stabilize? And that could be a matter of some months. For example, there are energy costs in crops, and the crops have to complete their growing cycle and then be harvested. But that there may be, in some respects, farmers are looking for higher income from their harvests, and that could be sometime next year. So it's really hard for me to give you a number, but the point is that energy is pervasive, but we're looking at the rate of change of energy prices.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much for your time today, sir. That was really helpful, and we appreciate it. That was former president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, Dennis Lockhart.